I was forced to come, the girl said coldly on blind date, but the single dad CEO changed everything. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The city was wrapped in the kind of winter chill that could cut straight through a coat, the streets buzzing with traffic and glowing signs. Inside one of Manhattan's fanciest rooftop restaurants, the Sterling House, Ethan Walker sat at a corner table near the window, his hands wrapped loosely around a glass of whiskey he hadn't even touched. His suit was sharp, his posture perfect, but his eyes carried that quiet exhaustion of someone who'd had too many conversations that never meant anything. He wasn't here for love. He was here because his assistant practically begged him to try one more time. When the elevator doors opened, a woman stepped out, brushing snow from her hair. She paused at the entrance, looking wildly out of place among the glitter and gold. That was Grace Miller. She wore a simple black dress that didn't belong in a place where people dined on meals that cost her entire week's pay. Her expression said it all. She didn't want to be there. Her best friend had signed her up for this blind date behind her back, and she only showed up to avoid another night of lectures about how she needed to get out there. When she reached the table, Ethan looked up, his gaze steady but unreadable. "Grace?" he asked in that low, calm voice that could silence a room. She nodded, clutching her purse tighter. Then, without sitting, she blurted, "I was forced to come." It wasn't the kind of line anyone expected on a blind date, but somehow it made him smirk. "That's a first," he said dryly, leaning back in his chair. "Usually people at least pretend they want to be here." Grace flushed, instantly regretting her bluntness. "Sorry, that sounded awful. She exhaled, sitting down. "I'm not really the dating type." Ethan tilted his head, studying her. "Good," he said simply. "Neither am I." That line caught her off guard. There was something disarming about how honest he was. No small talk, no fake charm. Just a man who looked like he'd seen too much and cared too little about impressing anyone. Before the awkward silence could stretch too long, a soft giggle echoed from behind Ethan. Grace glanced over. A little girl, maybe 6, peeked out from behind the table. Her curly brown hair framed a mischievous smile, and she wore a tiny pink coat with cartoon stickers all over it. "Daddy, is she the nice lady?" the little girl asked, clutching a small stuffed bear. Grace blinked, stunned. Ethan rubbed a hand over his face, slightly embarrassed. "Sophie," he sighed, "we talked about this." The girl ignored him and ran straight up to Grace, her big eyes sparkling. "You're pretty," she said, completely sincere. Grace laughed, an honest, soft laugh that Ethan hadn't heard in years. "Well, you're the sweetest little person I've met all week." For the first time that night, Ethan smiled. Not the polite kind, but a real one. And in that moment, something subtle shifted in the air between them. The date that was never supposed to happen had just taken a turn no one expected. And deep down, Ethan Walker, the man who had sworn off love, felt something he hadn't in a long, long time. Hope. The waiter had barely placed the menus down before Sophie was already chatting away, her tiny legs swinging under the chair. Grace couldn't help but smile as the little girl pointed to a picture of chocolate lava cake like it was the most important item in the world. "Daddy, can we get this?" "Please," she begged, eyes wide like she had practiced that look 100 times. Ethan looked half exasperated, half entertained. "You haven't even had dinner yet," he said in that firm dad tone. "But Grace hasn't had dinner either," Sophie argued quickly, glancing at her new ally. "We can share." Grace bit her lip, trying not to laugh. "You're a smart one, aren't you?" she teased. Sophie grinned. "Daddy says I get that from Mommy," she said innocently, before adding in a softer voice. "But Mommy's in heaven now." The air shifted. Grace's smile faltered just a little. She didn't know what to say, so she just reached across the table and handed Sophie a napkin. "Then you've got an angel watching over you," she said gently. Ethan looked away, his jaw tightening. He hadn't expected his daughter to bring that up. Not tonight, not in front of a stranger. But then something happened that surprised him. Grace didn't pity him. She didn't fumble for the right words or try to fill the silence. She just sat there, calm and steady, making Sophie giggle again within seconds by pretending to read the menu upside down. For the first time in a long while, Ethan found himself watching someone who didn't seem to be pretending. No forced charm, no agenda, just this woman who made his daughter laugh like she hadn't in months. Halfway through dinner, Sophie accidentally spilled her juice all over Grace's sleeve. The table went silent for half a second, but Grace just laughed it off, grabbing a napkin and saying, "Guess that's what I get for sitting next to the fun one." Ethan blinked. Most people would have been annoyed, but not her. Not this woman who didn't seem fazed by expensive restaurants or by the fact that she was dining with a man whose last name could buy the whole block. When Sophie finished her meal, she started yawning, her energy fading fast. Grace offered to walk them out, and the three of them stepped into the cold night. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the city lights, landing softly on Sophie's curls. Ethan helped his daughter into the car seat, then turned to Grace. "You're good with her," he said, his voice lower now, more sincere. Grace shrugged lightly. "Kids are easy," she said. "It's adults who usually mess things up." He chuckled under his breath. "You're not wrong about that." She smiled, but it was small, almost shy. "Well, thanks for the dinner, even though I kind of got tricked into it." "Tricked?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah," she teased. "You show up in a suit, order the fancy stuff, and then pull the cute kid card? That's not fair." He laughed, really laughed. A deep, warm sound that made Grace look at him differently for a second. Not as some cold businessman, but as a man who still had a heart somewhere under all that armor. When she finally turned to leave, Sophie's sleepy voice piped up from the back seat. "Daddy, can we see Grace again?" Ethan paused. Grace turned around, her breath catching slightly. He smiled faintly, meeting her eyes. "We'll see," he said. But deep down, both of them already knew. This wasn't the last time. As Grace walked away through the softly falling snow, Ethan found himself watching her until she disappeared into the crowd, wondering how a simple blind date had turned into something he couldn't stop thinking about. And inside his chest, where he'd kept his heart locked away for years, something began to stir again, quietly but unmistakably. Ethan couldn't shake it. No matter how many meetings he attended, how many contracts crossed his desk, or how many zeros flashed on the screen of his bank account, Grace kept showing up in his mind. That laugh, that warmth, the way she talked to Sophie like she'd known her for years. It wasn't something he could explain, but it felt real, and that scared him a little. 3 days later, he found himself parked outside the little diner downtown, the one Grace had mentioned she worked at sometimes. He told himself it was coincidence, that he was just hungry, that he needed a break from the boardroom, but deep down, he knew better. The bell above the door chimed as he walked in. The place smelled like coffee and pancakes, the kind of comfort you couldn't buy with all the money in the world. And there she was, hair pulled into a loose ponytail, apron tied around her waist, carrying 3 plates at once like she'd been born doing it. She froze when she saw him, eyes widening slightly. "Oh, great," she said under her breath, with a teasing grin. "Are you stalking me now, Mr. Fancy Suit?" He smirked. "Maybe I just came for the world-famous pancakes." "Uh-huh," she said, clearly not buying it. "Well, lucky for you, we only serve those to customers who can handle small-town gossip. You up for that?" He laughed. "Guess I'll risk it." She seated him at the corner booth, the same one near the window where sunlight spilled through the blinds. Sophie wasn't with him this time, but somehow the seat beside him still felt too empty. As she poured his coffee, he caught a faint bruise on her wrist. His brows furrowed. "Hey, what happened there?" Grace blinked surprised, then smiled faintly. "Oh, that? I just bumped into the counter. Happens all the time." But something in her tone didn't sit right. There was a hesitation there, something unspoken. Ethan didn't press, not yet, but it lingered in his mind like a quiet question. They talked while she worked, trading small jokes between her rounds. He found himself opening up more than usual, telling her about how hard it was to balance fatherhood and business, how losing his wife had left him half a man for years. Grace listened, really listened, not with pity, but with empathy. When the lunch crowd started rolling in, Ethan stood to leave, slipping a generous tip under the plate. Grace noticed it as he turned toward the door. Hey, she called after him, holding up the bills. That's way too much. He smiled. Consider it a thank you for the pancakes. Or a bribe to make me talk to you again? She shot back, crossing her arms with its same fiery smirk. Maybe a little of both, he admitted, chuckling. Grace shook her head, but smiled anyway. All right, Mr. Fancy Suit. If you're going to keep showing up, at least lose the tie next time. You look like a banker trying to blend in. He grinned. Deal. As he stepped outside, the city felt a little brighter. The cold didn't bite as hard. And when his phone buzzed with another corporate emergency, he ignored it for once. Because for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't thinking about mergers or board votes. He was thinking about a woman who made his daughter laugh and made him feel like life didn't have to be so heavy. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't done with Grace, not even close. The next time Ethan saw Grace, the sky was painted with shades of amber, the kind of evening that made the city feel slower, softer. He hadn't planned on being there again, but something about that little diner drew him in like gravity. Only this time, Grace wasn't there. The waitress behind the counter, an older woman with kind eyes, noticed him looking around. You looking for Grace, sweetheart? She asked. Ethan hesitated, feeling oddly caught. Yeah, she working tonight? The woman shook her head, her expression dimming. Took off early. Poor thing's been run ragged lately. You'd never guess it by how she smiles at everyone. But that girl's carrying a whole lot more than most can handle. Ethan frowned, a quiet worry tightening in his chest. Is she okay? The woman sighed. Her mom's been sick for months. Cancer treatments, bills piling up. Grace works double shifts here and still heads home to take care of her every night. Never complains, though. Just keeps pushing through. That hit him hard. Suddenly, all those little details made sense. The tired look in her eyes. The way she always brushed off questions about herself. Grace wasn't just strong, she was surviving. He left the diner and, without quite knowing why, drove to the address he'd overheard her mention once, when she'd been joking about her tiny apartment with a fridge older than her. When he pulled up, the building looked worn down, bricks faded, a single light flickering in the hallway window. He found her outside, sitting on the front steps, her head bowed over her phone. The glow lit her face in soft gold. She didn't notice him at first. Her shoulders were trembling. Grace? Her head snapped up, startled. For a second, embarrassment flashed across her face. Ethan? How did you even? He raised a hand gently. Relax, I'm not stalking you, I swear. I stopped by the diner, and when they said you weren't feeling great, I just wanted to check on you. Her eyes softened, but still held that guarded edge. You shouldn't see me like this, she said quietly. It's not exactly the picture-perfect version of me you get at the restaurant. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. I didn't come here for perfect. I came because I care. For a moment, the air hung heavy between them. Then Grace exhaled, her defenses finally cracking. My mom's in hospice, she admitted. We're running out of money, and I'm scared every day I'll wake up to find she's gone. I don't even know how to keep it together anymore. Ethan didn't say a word. He just sat beside her. No grand speeches, no empty promises, just quiet presence. After a while, Grace leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice barely a whisper. You ever feel like you're running so hard to save everyone else that you forget how to breathe yourself? Ethan gave a small, broken smile. Every single day. She looked up at him, and in that one shared silence, something shifted. The walls around both their hearts, the ones built by years of loss and disappointment, began to crumble. Before he left, Ethan pressed something into her hand, a simple card. No company logo, no name, just a number written in neat ink. Call me if you ever need anything. And I mean anything, Grace. She stared at it long after his card disappeared into the night, clutching it like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. What she didn't know yet was that Ethan wasn't just a man offering kindness. He was about to become the one person who would change everything. A week later, Grace woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. She blinked as sleep from her eyes and sat up in bed, the morning light spilling through her thin curtains. Dozens of missed calls, texts, and an unfamiliar number flashing at the top of her notifications. Her heart pounded. The hospice. She grabbed her jacket, ready for the worst, when her phone rang again. "Miss Taylor." The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "This is Dr. Bennett from St. Mary's. I'm calling with some good news. Your mother's medical bills have been covered, the entire balance. An anonymous donor paid for the next 6 months of treatment in full." Grace froze mid-step. "Wait, what? There must be a mistake. We don't know anyone who could do that. I assure you, Miss Taylor, everything's legitimate. Your mother's care is secure. You can focus on spending time with her." Her knees gave out. She sank onto the floor, tears spilling freely for the first time in weeks. Relief, disbelief, and gratitude collided in her chest. But deep down, she already had a gut feeling who had done it. That afternoon, Grace went straight to the diner, heart hammering. And sure enough, a familiar black SUV sat parked across the street. Ethan was inside, staring out the window, lost in thought. When he saw her marching toward him, he barely had time to step out before she blurted, "It was you, wasn't it?" He didn't deny it. "Yeah," he said simply, hands in his pockets. "You didn't deserve to carry that alone." Grace shook her head, tears welling up again. Not from sadness this time, but from something deeper. You can't fix my life like it's one of your projects, Ethan." He stepped closer, voice steady but soft. "I didn't do it to fix you. I did it because you reminded me what it means to care again. And if helping you makes me feel like I'm actually doing something good for once, then let me have that." She laughed through her tears. "You're ridiculous, you know that?" "Yeah," he said, smiling faintly. "But you're smiling again, so I'll take it." They stood there for a long moment in the fading afternoon light, the city's noise humming quietly around them. Then Ethan took a breath, as if bracing himself. "Grace, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said a long time ago." Her brows furrowed. "What is it?" He looked right into her eyes. "I'm not just some guy who shows up at that diner because I like their coffee. I own half the damn city block it sits on. I'm the CEO of Harrington Enterprises." Grace blinked, processing his words, her mouth opening slightly. "You're what?" He nodded slowly. "I didn't want you to see me as that guy. The one with money, the headlines, the stupid image. I just wanted to be a person who could make you smile without all that noise." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then quietly, "You know, most people would have led with the billionaire part." He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, I was kinda hoping you'd like me before finding that out." Grace stepped closer, close enough that he could feel her breath in the cold air. "I liked you the moment you sat down and treated me like a person." "That's not something money can buy, Ethan." He exhaled, relief softening his face. "Then maybe this is just the start of something real." Grace smiled faintly. "Real sounds nice." A week later, when he showed up at her apartment again, this time carrying takeout and a bouquet of cheap grocery store daisies, her mother was sitting up in bed, smiling for the first time in months. Grace introduced them, her eyes gleaming with a quiet warmth. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like the cold, untouchable CEO everyone thought he was. He was just a man who'd found something, someone, worth being human for again. Sometimes the richest people aren't the ones with the most money. They're the ones who finally find something worth giving everything for. If this journey touched your heart, make sure to subscribe the channel so you never miss another story that stirs the soul. And before you leave, click on one of the videos on your screen, because every story we share holds another moment that might change the way you see love, family, and the second chances.